Next example that I like to redo, or as I'm going to call it, makeover, is the UI catalog example. And it goes like this. We have a table view, I think, and there's a accessory type. When you click on it, you go to another detail view where you see buttons. Back will bring you back. I believe this is a good fit for a UI navigation controller. It gives you a table controller to go along with it. Then you can build different views and push them on top of it, and you automatically get this button. So that would be a good fit for this example. They are using a lot of code, and of course I'm going to use storyboards. So we have this information can be stored in a NS dictionary, mutable dictionary. Buttons could be the key, and this could be the description, or yeah, value of the key, and this could be the value. When I click on it, I'll probably go to another table view controller, and these are different sections. One section, another section. Each section has two rows. One row, static row. So this would be a static table with predefined number of sections, and each section has two rows, and it would be a label and a button, different type display. When I click on them, they actually don't do anything, but they just represent different type of buttons. UI catalog makeover using storyboards. So again, I'm going to start off by making a master detail application. Use storyboards, that's for sure. Universal. I'm going to leave it as universal so we can see the difference. And as soon as it loads, I'm going to run it, make sure it works. Then I'm going to jump into modifying it. I am going to start iPhone simulator. So this is how it looks. I don't need the edit button or the plus button. I need options right there. So I'm going to get started on that right now. And basically it would be in the project manager. There are two storyboards for iPhone and iPad, and I'm interested in this one. In this one, the table view is connected to, I need that. Click on the master. Let's see that. Yeah, you see, clicking it. Yeah, you gotta double click it. I just use this one. So once I have clicked master view controller, I can see what class it goes to. Master view controller, and I'm gonna get rid of that, make some space, code to work with, and I'm gonna organize my data arrays here next. So far in master view controller header, I'm going to declare a property NS mutable dictionary called data, synthesize data, alloc init data, data set object for value of it, buttons. There's, I'm going to elaborate on it, and it needs to be something, that value needs to be something else, and I have to see that. But that's how I'm going to add all those text fields and all those, keep going on and on. I don't need the left edit, I don't need the edit button. I don't need the right button. So I'm going to get rid of those. Number of rows in section, no sorry, number of sections in the table, 1. Number of rows in section, data.count. Number of cell for row at index path. I got to change that right there to make an instance of the correct type of cell and set its text value. Okay, so far, so I've gone ahead and I use the data set object, the value, various uses of UI buttons, for key buttons, and I went ahead and made 12 of them by looking at the other example, and then I run this example, and there we go. We have the first screen all ready. I gotta fix that label up there. So that's done right here. UI catalog. Remember to press enter so the value will take. And now we have it exactly like the first page is exactly the same. And now what I need to do is did selected row change event handle that. Here we go. We got ran into a little problem. As you can see that the things don't appear in the same order that I added them in. Buttons was the first one and pickers are the next one. NS Mutable Dictionary, they are not ordered. Now that's going to be a problem. So how do I the answer is to use NS Mutable Array. Arrays have items in order, the same order as you add them in. So how do I add? I want two things stored: the name and the value. Sorry, the name and description. So the answer is that I'm going to have to use an NS Mutable Array and store a class with multiple values in it. So that's how it goes. I'm going to have to declare a property, NS Mutable Array, UICatalog Array, synthesize it. Sorry, right here, synthesize. Then I'm going to alloc init it. Then I jumped into creating a class called UICatalog Items. It inherits from NS object. Two properties in it: NS string type, name, description, and init method which takes in two parameters, name and description. Synth name and description, synthesize name and description, implementation of that method, and I am going to do self.name is equal to name, self.description is equal to description. And right here it'll be return self. Now that got rid of it. Maybe I could do this then. Nah, I don't know. So I'm going to just stick with it, even though there's a warning here now. I could have named them differently. Underscore name, perhaps. Let me try that. I'm going to get rid of this error. So the private variable will be name, underscore name. No, I really don't want that. I'm just going to go with that. And jump into master view controller. And every time I'm going to have to do a alloc init with UI catalog array alloc init with okay, so I was UI catalog items, then I'm going to go back to master view controller. I'm going to import UI catalogs item.h, and then in the view did load, I think I did also already covered synthesizing UI catalog array. Then alloc init UI catalog array. I'm going to add an object one at a time, which is going to be UI catalogs and alloc init with name buttons description. So that's how one at a time I'm going to add an object into the arrays and see how that works. Here we go. The things are appearing in the same order as I add them in. How? Okay, so this is, I was right there, so I added 12 more. The same technique, copied and pasted 11 more times. Brought the name here, description there. Got rid of everything else. I am going to remove the data, no longer needed. Remove it. No change here. Number of rows in section is going to change now to UI catalog array count. Cell for row at index path is going to change. I am going to get a UI catalog items type called item, and I am going to get it from UI catalog array object at index path dot row. It's going to automatically implicitly convert it to that type. Now I can say cell text label text is item.name. I think this is much more intuitive than using NS mutable dictionary. That did not work. So NS mutable array stores a custom class in, and the result is perfectly. I have perfectly same order as the other. Next step I did was add buttons view controller. Just another class. Add one more class, button view controller, that inherits from UI table view controller. I go to storyboard. I deleted the detail screen there was here. Drag a table view controller here. Change its custom class to buttons view controller. Change its storyboard ID to the same. And then I jumped over into the master view controller, went down to did selected row at index change, delete this piece of code, and create a UI table cell value table view cell for row at index path, and a string text is equal to going to be cell.text label.text. So that's how I'll fetch the text of the label in the cell. Now here's the technique. If text is equal to buttons, then I'm going to create an instance of button view controller, call it detail view controller. I'm going to get it from self storyboard, instantiate view controller with identifier buttons view controller. Then detail view.title is cell.text label.text. Self.buttons view controller is going to be the detail view controller. Self navigation controller, push view controller, self buttons view controller animated yes. Now this buttons view controller, to get that I added in the header file I have to, is this the right one? No, this is buttons view controller, wrong one. I'm gonna close it, click it, open it up again. Yes, now the master view controller H is open. This is master view controller.m. That's always confusing. I added another property in the H file, buttons view controller type called buttons view controller, and that's what I used here in cell for did select row at index path. So I'm gonna, if the cell clicked is buttons, then I'm gonna create, so the same thing I'm gonna techniques I'm gonna follow. If text is equal to text box and all that stuff, I'm gonna keep repeating this process. Add a class file in the storyboard A, add a table view, and go to the master view controller.m, create a property of that type, and then copy and paste this if statement for the next one. Change the view controller's name, so every time, depending on which cell is clicked, a different view will show up. Now for right now, at this point, I need to flesh this out. I need to come in here and start working on this table before I go and start making other table. In the buttons view controller, I want to make a static table with number of sections. Each section will have two static rows. The first row will have a label and a button, and the second, let me. Okay, so I'm back in the UI catalog. When I click on buttons, I want to see a screen. I have this blank one, but I want to make sections, a static table with number of sections. One section will say UI button. It will have two rows, one row, two row. First row will have an image and one kind of button and a description of that button. Another section UI button, button with image, a label, and another kind of button and its description, and just keep going. All these sections I need to build now. My objective is to build this static cell, and click on the table view, make it big, make it go away, have the utilities view, scroll to the right and click the UI table view. Now I want to find some properties where I can say static cell. Okay, so I am going to be in attributes inspector. Content is going to be static cell. Number of sections, I gotta count how many there were in the other one. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sections. And each, okay, 7 sections. Come over here in the utilities inspector. I need 7 cells. Now I have to click each cell and change number of head rows are going to be 2, and the section is going to be, I gotta change the name of it. I think it's at UI button. I'm gonna have to go back. You see it got changed, and I wanted to change another style. I think I need to go to table view. No, you see I need that back. Need to select table view, and there's another property here called style grouped. Yeah, you see there's the style I want, grouped. Okay, so I went ahead and changed all of them. I think I'm accidentally moving things around as I scroll up. I'm clicking and dragging. Well, actually, learned a new thing. You can actually, within the user interface, click and drag things around in different order. So now it's time to add labels and buttons to the cell boxes. So there are two things. I made some attempt here. I'm gonna put a label there, and drag a round rectangular button right there. So I can adjust. I'm gonna start looking at how to set properties in the interface builder. The old example used a lot of code. So the X and Y positions you can do by dragging. Length and height and width you can do by dragging. Now this is an image button, it has an image at the behind it. So now I'm gonna look at those properties. Of course, you can double click and change the label. There are some label properties, but button is the most important. So first of all, I'm gonna need to import images from the sample app. I've already done that. And white button and blue button are the images I'm going to use here. The way I imported the images were right click, add files, and find the example, the directory, click it, add it, and the images ended up in my project. Back to storyboard. I'm going to select, the button is selected, and the property is showing up. So these are the two things that I'm going to be working with. The height and width can either be typed here, XY positions can be either typed in here, or you can use drag and drop to change them. And that's all. Out of all these properties, these are the ones. Actually, there's nothing interesting here. The tab I want to be working with is attributes inspector. Now instead of round rectangle, I want a custom. See, when I do the custom, the background disappears. I want my own background. State config. Now that's important. Default is how the button will look like when it's here. So the background image is the white button, that PNG. Now you see how the shape is now. Right now it's too much curving going around here. It doesn't look like the button in the example. Now when I click on the button, it turned blue background. That's done. State config. You see, that's very important. It took me like a couple of hours to figure that out. State config, there's several ones. One is highlighted. When the button is clicked, that's the property, highlighted. So I want the blue button there. Blue button, that PNG, when it's clicked. So at this point, you see the shape isn't exactly right, so I gotta do something with it. And I played with all these properties, and none of them had any effect. Let's see what I'm talking about. I'm gonna run this sample. See, when I click on it, it turns blue. That's right, that's the same thing, but the shape isn't right. This one is right, and the design view isn't right. So what countermeasure did I take? Let's talk about that one. See, this is the same old way. This is the way the old example is. The shape looks like this, much more good looking. And when I click, it turns blue. But that isn't happening here. So the countermeasure to that is that I need to create a custom class, subclass the my button. Just right click, new file, object C class, next. And here I typed in the my button. Subclass of UI button. Next, and go through the here. So that added a class for me called my UI button. And I did some magic in that class. Because we have run into a situation, I have run into a situation where the user interface limitations of the user interface. Not every property on this button or the image used in this button is available in this. It would be very huge. There are other properties there. There is no way to change those here. So I'm going to have to write a little bit of code. But now that I have this class, the challenge is, how do I tell it? Well, don't use the UI button class, use my button class. Well, that's done right in here. One of them is my button selected. My button is selected. This one, this tab, instead of UI button, I'm going to change it to my class. As soon as that it'll let me, it has locked up. My button. So that's how I can drag the rounded rectangle button here, then go back in here and tell it to use another class as opposed to the my button class. Now I'm not gonna see in the design mode the changes. They are not going to be visible here. They'll only be visible at runtime. So I'm going to go back to the original example and look around a little bit, see what the labels look like. Looking at the original example, background image, it says background image there. Then it has this text right there, buttons view controller.m, UI button, gray button. A gray button says gray with a capital G. It's the background button, the name of the view controller, and the method that it calls. That's all there is on that one. Actually, I don't have these methods. I'm using storyboard. See, right now they are writing a lot of code to make these buttons. New button, and here's that gray button method, and I don't have these at all. Okay, it says background image. You gotta remember that. Okay, so that was just an example to show what I'm doing. So I'm gonna get rid of that one. I was working on this one. So same thing with class is now my UI button. These properties, I set the highlighted property to blue button, background image, default to white button.png, and then I'm gonna pick up in my code the my button custom subclass of the button. I'm gonna pick up these properties and do some things with it so they look like the other one. So this label said background image, and then there was a label here. Button view controller.m, and the second line, you see I have to set some properties on this one too for the second line to show up. So let's look at that one. Number of lines 2. storyboard. So there's how two lines can be. Now the font was a little bit smaller. That's how I can change the font. Make it a little bit bigger, or make this a little bit smaller. So that's how two lines can be shown up. So that's the only one significant property of the label, that storyboard. They are doing it in code, I'm doing it in storyboard. Now I can jump into this .m file, I believe, and show you what magic was done there. Nothing is done in the header file, the whole thing is done right here. Well, I do need to look at, see buttons, no, not the button view controller. Yeah, interface, my button, subclass of UI button. So it has all the functionality of the UI button. Plus I'm gonna override the draw rect method, and in it, let me get rid of this as well. Okay, I'm gonna create a new image, and it's gonna come from self background image for state colon UI state normal. So in the state config normal, the image that I put in, I'm gonna pull it out here. And once I have that image, I'm gonna go this magic property, stretch image with left gap width 12 and top gap height 0. And that's the new image is gonna be all right and nice and stretched. So that's the magic trick right here. Then I'm going to set the background image again and override the one in the storyboard by manipulating it to the new image, for which state UI state normal. In the user interface, if I go back there and bring it a lot of jumping around, see there was a state config default that corresponds to this one here. That's how it's done in code, and the previous one was how it's done in the storyboard. So I pull the image back out using this technique and manipulate it and then set it back for that normal state, and it's all stretched. Now when I press the button, I do the same technique, UI image new pressed me, self background image for state, UI control state highlighted. Then I'm going to call stretchable image with left gap, and then set the background back to new pressed image, which has been manipulated for state, UI control state highlighted, and that should do the trick. It took me all day to actually try these things out to make it to work. Buttons, background image, 2 lines label, gray, well with a capital G, but never mind that, but it looks exactly the other one in the example. So using the storyboard, a custom class, a little bit of code, and there we are. So I'm gonna recap it. I add a new class, subclass of my button called my button, subclass of UI button. Override the rectangular method, these 2 lines of code to manipulate the normal state image, these 2 lines to manipulate the pressed image button is called highlighted, the other one is normal. Then in the storyboard, I drag a regular button up there. I change its custom class to my UI button. In the attributes expand, I changed it to custom. State config default background image white button. State config highlighted background blue button. And these three things, I had to change this to custom. Even the other one was working. So that did it. Yeah, it appears either the custom or round rectangular button works. I will go with the custom. So now off to the next button, the image button. Now the other button again looks like it has the gray button. It has the blue highlighted state image. It says button with image. Instead of saying gray, it has an image on top of it. That's what that one does. So that simply says button with image. Now this one right there, lines 2. Actually, what is going to be? I think that I can option, click and drag to make a copy of it. That is exactly the same thing. This option, hold on the option button, click, and then drag it down. So that'll make a copy of it. Now I can drag a round rectangular button, and I could have done this with this as well, but I wanna do it again so we can reinforce the learning. Make it a little bit longer, and in here, my button. Change the class and click anywhere outside it. Custom, state config default, background white button. I think you have to click anywhere outside, like in the image button for the white button. You have to type it here, type white button here, click here so it will stay get saved. Then go to highlight it, blue button, click here for now. Here default the image was the other arrow, and I gotta find which arrow was. And that image is UI button underscore custom PNG. I wonder if I can copy it. Yeah, so I double click it, highlight it, control C it, go back here, go back to my button. I want the button selected. For the default, the image is that one. Click anywhere outside it. I want it in the center. I don't want any. I think there is no label. Take that out, and it became centered. Run it and see if it looks right. In the design mode, it does not. At runtime, also it does not. Because I think it's cached in there somewhere, so I gotta stop and start it a few times. Yeah, exactly. You see how I typed in my UI button? I have to click somewhere um, outside it to save it. Now if I go here and come back here, it's saved. Yeah, leaving the mouse cursor inside it does not save it. Just type anywhere outside it to save it. Hopefully that was it. That was a little caveat there. Cool. Yeah, that was it. Its size isn't exactly right. Let's fix that one. size is 106/40. So that's one way it can be changed. 106/40, and I gotta press tab. I'll press tab to get out of this, so it's saved. As we saw, just typing it in there and going to another tab does not save it. You gotta save it. Press tab. Okay, that looks right. Now a little bit on this side. I could move this one to this a little bit more that way. With the mouse, it's not precise to do, so I'm going to use the right arrow key to make those precise movements. And ladies and gentlemen, we have button with image, exactly like the other one. No code. Instead of all that code, using the storyboard and properties.